silence was deafening, broken only by the cold, biting wind whipping across the frozen Belgian landscape. It was December 17th, 1944, just past dawn, and a colossal armored spearhead, the very tip of Germany's desperate gamble in the Ardennes, lay motionless. Its powerful engines, designed for swift advance, now stood silent, choked by an invisible enemy, an empty fuel tank. SS Obersturmführer Joachim Peiper, a commander renowned for his audacious leadership, struck the metallic hatch of his Tiger tank. Frustration, sharp and icy like the morning air, pierced through him. His driver had tried, again and again, to coax life back into the magnificent Maybach engine. Nothing. The fuel gauge, a silent harbinger of impending doom, confirmed the grim reality. Empty. Around him, the scene was mirrored across his formidable Kampfgruppe. 67 tanks, 149 half-tracks, nearly 5,000 of the Waffen-SS's most elite soldiers, all brought to a standstill. Ahead, through the morning mist, lay Hansfeld, an American supply depot, a critical junction for the U.S. 99th Infantry Division, now seemingly abandoned in a hasty retreat. Fires still flickered in discarded oil drums. Coffee remained warm in metal cups. And there, stretched out before them, an almost surreal vision, row upon row of olive-drab American jerry cans. Peiper approached the colossal stockpile with a mix of disbelief and awe. His adjutant, Hans Gruller, pried open a can, the unmistakable scent of high-octane gasoline filling the air. His men, fueled by a renewed frantic energy, began the monumental task of transferring the enemy's lifeblood into their own formidable machines. Peiper walked among the bounty, counting. The figures were staggering: 50,000 gallons, enough to power his entire unit to the Meuse River, enough to potentially reignite the faltering Ardennes offensive. The Americans had abandoned more fuel in this single, seemingly minor depot than many German divisions had received in the past half-year. Yet as Peiper observed his men, a chilling realization descended upon him. If the Americans could afford to abandon such quantities, if they could leave behind what Germany would defend with entire divisions, then perhaps this conflict was already decided. Germany hadn't simply miscalculated, they had fundamentally misunderstood the very essence of their adversary. 6 months prior, in June 1944, Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments, had delivered a stark report to the Führer. Allied aerial campaigns had systematically crippled Germany's synthetic fuel production, the very lifeblood of the Wehrmacht. Key production facilities, once churning out vast quantities of fuel, now lay in ruins, their output reduced to a mere trickle. The numbers painted a grim picture of impending defeat. In 1944, the United States alone produced an astonishing 1.8 billion barrels of crude oil. Germany, even with its synthetic production and captured Romanian fields, managed a mere 33 million barrels, less than 2% of American output. The Third Reich was attempting to wage a modern, mechanized conflict with logistics that often relied on horse-drawn transport. Major Friedrich Simon of the Wehrmacht's Logistics Command had estimated the Ardennes offensive would require 4.5 million gallons of fuel to reach Antwerp. Hitler, in a detached gesture, allocated 5 million gallons. However, due to severe transportation challenges, only half of that amount ever reached the front lines. The German High Command was essentially staking the entire offensive on capturing enemy supplies, a strategy that exposed a profound weakness rather than projecting strength. Across the lines, the American logistical effort was a stark contrast. The Pluto pipeline system, laid beneath the English Channel, ensured a steady flow of petroleum. And then there was the Red Ball Express, a colossal network of trucks ferrying 12,500 tons of supplies daily to the front. By December 1944, American forces in Europe were consuming 1.2 million gallons of fuel each day, yet receiving 1.4 million. They were building up reserves even as they pushed forward in fierce engagements. Joachim Peiper was no ordinary officer. At 29, he was one of the youngest regimental commanders in the Waffen-SS, a recipient of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords. A veteran of the brutal Eastern Front, he understood that in the modern battlefield, fuel was a commodity even more precious than ammunition. His Kampfgruppe had been designated the Schwerpunkt, the decisive spearhead of the entire Ardennes offensive. On December 14th, just 2 days before the offensive, Peiper attended the final briefing at Tondorf. General Sepp Dietrich, commander of the 6th SS Panzer Army, laid out the grim truth with stark clarity. You will have enough fuel to reach the Meuse if you capture American supplies. Peiper's unit was allocated a mere 31,000 gallons, enough for perhaps 50 miles of combat operations. The distance to the Meuse? 65 miles. The blueprint for failure was embedded in the very foundations of the plan. As his column prepared to advance on December 16th, Peiper issued stringent orders. Tanks would move in single file to conserve every precious drop. Engines would be silenced during any halt exceeding 5 minutes. And above all, tactical objectives. The capture of American fuel depots was designated the absolute top priority. The contrast with American operations that same morning was striking. Just 20 miles from Peiper's starting position, Captain James Rose of the U.S. 743rd Tank Battalion noted in his diary, received fuel resupply 8,000 gallons. Third delivery this week. Storage tanks already at capacity. It was a simple entry, yet it spoke volumes about two vastly different realities. The German artillery barrage that launched Operation Watch on the Rhine on December 16, 1944, at 0530 hours, unleashed more ammunition in 2 hours than the Wehrmacht had allocated for entire operations earlier in the conflict. Yet even this thunderous display barely masked the critical shortages plaguing the German war machine. Peiper's column began its advance at 7 a.m., already behind schedule. Roads that appeared as major highways on German maps proved to be narrow, unpaved country lanes, ill-suited for heavy armor. Within hours, traffic congestion became a major challenge, as vehicles designed for the vast Russian steppes struggled through the dense Ardennes forest. At Landserath, Peiper's initial objective, they met unexpected and fierce resistance. A single American intelligence and reconnaissance platoon, just 18 men, managed to hold back the mighty German armored column for nearly 10 agonizing hours. During this prolonged delay, Peiper's vehicle sat idling, consuming precious fuel with every passing minute. When they finally broke through and reached Hansfeld at dawn on December 17th, Peiper's column had covered a mere 20 miles, but had already consumed 40% of their meager fuel allocation. At this rate, they would exhaust their supplies long before reaching the halfway point to the Meuse. The American supply depot at Hansfeld was not even a primary facility. It was a forward supply point for the 99th Infantry Division, classified by the U.S. Army as a Class 3B depot, essentially a temporary fuel station. Yet what Peiper discovered there surpassed the entire monthly fuel allocation for a German panzer division. Gruller later recounted, "We found pyramids of jerry cans, each containing 5 gallons of gasoline. They were stacked 3 meters high, extending for perhaps 200 meters. The Americans had not even attempted to destroy them. The captured fuel was high-octane aviation gasoline, far superior to the lower-octane fuel German vehicles, especially the temperamental Maybach engines of the Tiger tanks, were designed for." Ironically, this superior fuel caused engine issues in several German vehicles. As Peiper's men refueled, they made further discoveries. Sergeant Wilhelm Hoffmann, who had worked in his father's import business before the conflict and could read English, found shipping manifests in the depot office. The papers detailed an astonishing journey. Fuel shipped from Texas to New York, across the vast Atlantic to Liverpool, then across the Channel to Normandy, and finally trucked 400 miles to Hansfeld, a journey of over 6,000 miles completed in less than 6 weeks. "I showed the papers to Obersturmführer Peiper," Hoffmann recalled in a 1976 interview. "He read them twice, then crumpled them up. He said nothing, but his face went pale. We both understood what this meant." Private Ernst Kara discovered a stack of Stars and Stripes newspapers dated December 15th, just 2 days old. The headline celebrated the opening of a new fuel pipeline from Cherbourg to Verdun, capable of delivering 300,000 gallons per day. A single pipeline delivering more fuel daily than Peiper's entire Kampfgruppe would use throughout the offensive. To truly grasp the profound impact of Peiper's discovery, one must understand Germany's critical fuel situation by late 1944. Since May, relentless Allied bombing had slashed synthetic fuel production by 90%. The Luftwaffe, once a fearsome aerial force, was literally being grounded for lack of aviation fuel. Pilot training was drastically reduced. The German Navy's surface fleet had largely ceased operations. U-boats were fitted with snorkels, forced to run on batteries longer to conserve precious diesel. On the home front, German civilians hadn't seen private automobile traffic since 1942. Gasoline had become so invaluable that the Gestapo actively investigated black market theft of even individual liters. Farmers were reverting to horse-drawn plows, a grim reflection of a nation struggling to maintain a mechanized conflict. Meanwhile, the United States was producing an incredible 67% of the world's oil. The East Texas oil field alone produced more petroleum than all of German-occupied Europe combined. American refineries operated at such astonishing capacities that companies like Standard Oil were actively experimenting with new petroleum byproducts simply because they had an excess of crude oil. With the 50,000 gallons captured at Hansfeld, Peiper's columns surged forward, temporarily reinvigorated. They reached Billingen by noon on December 17th, where they seized even more supplies, rations, ammunition, and crucially, maps indicating other American fuel depots in the area. But these maps also unveiled a disturbing truth. The Americans had fuel stockpiles everywhere. Every major crossroads seemed to boast a depot. The U.S. First Army alone held 3.5 million gallons in reserve. Peiper pushed on to Ligneville, a location that would later be infamous for a dark chapter in the offensive. Here his forces were involved in the Malmedy incident, a tragic event where American prisoners were eliminated. Even this desperate act was intertwined with the overwhelming fuel shortage, as Peiper later claimed he could not spare gasoline to transport the captives. By the evening of December 17th, Peiper's spearhead reached Stavelot, the site of a truly massive American fuel depot, holding over 2 million gallons. Here, it seemed, was enough fuel to guarantee reaching the Meuse. But as the first German vehicles approached, American engineers were already at work. Captain John Brewster of the 201st Engineer Combat Battalion had received warnings of the German advance. His orders were uncompromising: deny the enemy fuel at all costs. The Stavelot depot contained 2,189,000 gallons of gasoline, stacked in jerry cans across 15 acres. At 16:30 on December 17th, as Peiper's advance guard neared, Captain Brewster gave the order. Engineers swiftly poured gasoline trails between the towering stacks. White phosphorus incendiary devices were distributed. Technical Sergeant Paul Sollers hurled the first device. The explosion was immediate and tremendous, he recalled. A wall of fire shot up maybe 100 feet. Within minutes, the entire depot was an inferno. Peiper's lead tanks arrived to find a towering pillar of black smoke rising 1,000 feet into the sky. The fire would rage for 3 relentless days, consuming enough fuel to have powered Peiper's entire division to Antwerp and back. Peiper's driver later described the scene. The Obersturmführer stood on his tank turret, watching the flames. He said nothing for perhaps 5 minutes. Then he climbed down and told me, "They can afford to burn 2 million gallons to deny them to us. What are we doing here?" Across the Ardennes, American engineers were systematically destroying fuel dumps rather than risk their capture. At Trois Ponts, 1.1 million gallons were consumed by fire. At Spa, 2.5 million gallons were eliminated. In total, the Americans deliberately neutralized over 8 million gallons during the first week, an amount greater than Germany had allocated for the entire offensive. This ability to casually eradicate millions of gallons of precious fuel was rooted in a supply system that defied German comprehension. The Red Ball Express alone had delivered 412,000 tons of supplies, utilizing 6,000 trucks operating around the clock. Each truck consumed 40 gallons daily. The operation itself burned more fuel than German Army Group B received monthly. By December 1944, the Motor Transport Service employed 230 truck companies operating on a sophisticated network of color-coded routes. This intricate system delivered 20,000 tons of supplies daily, including 3,000 tons of fuel. Colonel James Snyder, Chief Logistics Officer for the First Army, recorded on December 18th. Fuel receipts yesterday, 1,147,000 gallons. Fuel issued, 1,623,000 gallons. Net gain to reserves, 224,000 gallons. The Americans were building reserves even amidst intense combat. The pipeline system was even more impressive. Operation Pluto had laid pipes across the English Channel, pumping 1 million gallons daily from Britain. A vast network of pipelines extended inland, with the Cherbourg-Paris line delivering 800,000 gallons daily and the Seine line moving 650,000 gallons. By December 1944, Allied forces in Northwest Europe were consuming 7.5 million gallons daily, yet receiving 8.2 million. They were not merely maintaining operations, they were building massive reserves during a major offensive. As Peiper pushed deeper into Belgium on December 18th, the futility of the German position became agonizingly clear. At Stoumont, they captured another depot, only to see 5,000 gallons consumed in 3 hours of intense combat. Tiger tanks, mighty as they were, devoured 2.5 gallons per mile in battle. Panthers, 1.5 gallons. In the unforgiving Ardennes terrain, consumption increased by 40%. Otto Dingler, maintenance officer for the 1st SS Panzer Regiment, recorded, "By noon on December 18th, We had consumed 67,000 gallons since the offensive began. We had captured perhaps 55,000 gallons. We were operating at a deficit. The American intelligence services, through their ultra-intercepts, were fully aware of Peiper's desperate fuel situation. General Courtney Hodges issued orders to all units. Enemy critically short of fuel, destroy all gasoline stocks threatened by capture. That same day, American C-47 transport aircraft flew 316 sorties, delivering crucial supplies to the besieged garrison at Bastogne, including 160,000 gallons of fuel. The Americans were airlifting more fuel to a surrounded outpost than Peiper's entire Kampfgruppe possessed for its main offensive thrust. By December 19th, as Peiper's forces engaged defenders at Stoumont, the fuel crisis had spiraled into a catastrophic reality. Tanks were being abandoned, not due to battle damage, but solely because their fuel tanks were empty. Peiper consolidated his remaining fuel, perhaps 8,000 gallons, enough for one more engagement or a desperate retreat, but not both. Meanwhile, Allied planners were already looking ahead, preparing for January operations. Brigadier General Maurice Gilland requested a staggering 245 million gallons for the coming month. The request was approved without so much as a discussion. The contrast in resources extended beyond mere quantity. American vehicles were standardized for efficiency. Sherman tanks consumed 0.8 gallons per mile, compared to the Tiger's 2.5. American trucks, fully loaded, achieved 8 miles per gallon. Parts were interchangeable, maintenance simplified. German forces, in stark contrast, operated a bewildering array of captured and manufactured vehicles, each with different requirements. French tanks demanded different oil than German Panthers. Soviet trucks needed different parts than German Opels. Each such complication multiplied logistical challenges exponentially. On December 20th, Peiper received a devastating radio message. Fuel convoy destroyed by Allied aircraft. No resupply possible. Continue with available resources. Peiper summoned his commanders. Sturmbannführer Werner Pötschke was blunt. We have fuel for perhaps 20 kilometers. The Meuse is 30 kilometers away. According to Gruler's testimony, Peiper then delivered a chilling address. Gentlemen, we have discovered we are fighting an enemy who burns more fuel to deny it to us than we receive for this entire operation. What we captured at Hansfeld, which seemed miraculous, was nothing to them. We cannot win. This profound realization was rapidly spreading through the German High Command. General Hasso von Manteuffel, commanding the 5th Panzer Army, later wrote, "When I learned Americans had destroyed 8 million gallons rather than risk our capturing it, I knew the offensive had failed before it began." Colonel Friedrich von der Heide, captured on December 23rd, told interrogators, "Your soldiers throw away chocolate. My men haven't seen chocolate in 2 years. You burn millions of gallons. We measure by the liter. How can we fight such abundance?" By December 21st, Peiper's forces were encircled at La Glaise, his tanks immobile. The American forces surrounding him, including the 31st Infantry Division, 82nd Airborne, and 3rd Armored, had a combined fuel allocation of 340,000 gallons for December 21st alone. Peiper had perhaps 1,000 gallons. Private First Class Richard McKinney wrote home, "We've got Germans surrounded who ran out of gas. Our captain jokes we use more fuel heating coffee than they have for tanks." The American response exemplified industrial warfare at its peak. Patton's 3rd Army, in an astonishing pivot north, required 350,000 gallons just for redeployment an operation considered impossible by German standards, yet accomplished in 3 days. December 23rd brought clear weather, a cruel twist of fate for the Germans. Allied aircraft launched 2,000 sorties, each consuming fuel at rates that would have grounded the Luftwaffe for weeks. P-47 Thunderbolt fighters devoured 300 gallons per hour. B-26 Marauder bombers burned 200 gallons hourly. One single day's Allied air operations consumed more fuel than Germany's entire allocation for the Ardennes offensive. On the night of December 23rd to 24th, Peiper made the agonizing decision to abandon his vehicles and escape on foot. Of the 119 tanks and assault guns that began the offensive, 39 remained operational but utterly immobilized. These magnificent machines were systematically destroyed with remaining ammunition rather than allowing them to fall into enemy hands. Oberleutnant Heinz Guss described the scene. "We drained the last fuel from all vehicles, maybe 200 gallons total. The Obersturmführer personally eliminated his command tank. Millions of Reichsmarks of equipment destroyed by empty fuel tanks. Of the 5,000 men who began with Kampfgruppe Peiper, approximately 770 returned. They had advanced 60 miles, captured several depots, and in doing so, uncovered the stark truth about Allied logistics." News of Peiper's discoveries spread rapidly through the German command structure. On December 26th, Field Marshal Walter Model received reports on the captured American supplies. His chief of staff recorded Model's reaction. The Field Marshal read the quantities twice: 50,000 gallons at Hansfeld, 2 million burned at Stavelot, 8 million destroyed rather than captured. He uttered, "We are not fighting the same war." Hitler, informed on December 28th, stubbornly refused to accept the reality. Speer wrote, "Hitler insisted the numbers were propaganda. When shown photographs of burning Stavelot, he claimed it was Hollywood effects." But at the lower ranks, the truth was undeniable. Gruler Wilhelm Hoffmann wrote his wife, "Americans destroy more fuel daily than we receive monthly. They drive tanks like we march. This conflict is irrevocably lost." The fuel crisis was a stark symptom of a larger, overwhelming truth. By 1944, America was producing 50% of the world's manufacturing output. A new aircraft every 5 minutes, a ship daily, a tank every 7 minutes. Petroleum production statistics were simply overwhelming. United States, 1.8 billion barrels. Soviet Union, 110 million barrels. Germany, including synthetic, 33 million barrels. Japan, 2.6 million barrels. The Axis powers combined produced less than 2% of American petroleum. Every major German offensive after 1942 had been severely constrained by fuel shortages. Conversely, every American offensive was sustained by an abundance that German planners simply could not fathom. Lieutenant Colonel Chester Hansen recorded a telling incident on December 27th. A logistics officer reported that weather had reduced fuel deliveries to only 500,000 gallons daily. There was genuine concern until someone pointed out that this single day's delivery exceeded Germany's total allocation for the entire offensive. German prisoners of war from the Ardennes were often more shocked by American perceived waste than by their firepower. Witnessing GIs casually discard half-eaten rations or use gasoline for heating purposes shattered their morale more profoundly than artillery bombardments. Oberstleutnant Erich von Manstein told interrogators, "We knew your production numbers abstractly, but seeing soldiers waste more than we possessed made them real. Every German who saw your casual abundance knew the conflict was hopeless." This devastating knowledge spread like wildfire through letters, defying all censorship. Feldwebel Ernst Miller wrote, "Americans wash clothes in gasoline. They feed chocolate to dogs. They fire artillery for Christmas. We cannot contend with such infinity." The psychological impact was immense, undermining German narratives of racial superiority. How could these decadent Americans possess such wealth while the master race scraped for basic necessities? During the Nuremberg trials, German leaders consistently cited logistics, particularly fuel, as a decisive factor in their downfall. Field Marshal Keitel testified, "We had operational superiority from 1940 to 41. By 1944, we couldn't move forces for lack of fuel, while Americans moved entire armies like chess pieces." Peiper himself, during his trial, offered revealing testimony. Every decision after December 17th was influenced by fuel shortage. We couldn't maneuver, pursue, or retreat effectively. Americans moved freely while we counted leaders. General Heinz Guderian wrote, "When Peiper captured 50,000 gallons, it meant everything to him, but nothing to Americans. The conflict was over." This story resonates because it marks a pivotal moment when industrial warfare reached its undeniable conclusion. Major conflicts were now determined by production statistics, not solely by warrior courage. The romanticized notion of conflict perished in the Ardennes amidst empty fuel tanks. Dr. Richard Overy calculated that by 1944, the Allied to Axis production ratios exceeded 5.1 in major categories. In petroleum, it approached an astounding 50.1. These overwhelming advantages simply could not be overcome by superior training or tactical prowess alone. America produced 324,750 aircraft during the war. Germany, 119,997. Americans built 88,410 tanks, Germany 46,857. But most tellingly, America refined 1.8 billion barrels of oil in 1944 alone, while Germany scraped together 33 million barrels. December 24, 1944, as Peiper's men slipped through American lines on foot, abandoning 39 tanks, 70 half-tracks, and 177 other vehicles, the full magnitude of their situation crystallized. They had captured 50,000 gallons, a seemingly miraculous bounty, only to discover it was utterly meaningless to an enemy who could simply ignite and destroy millions more. Peiper's driver reflected in 1975. "That morning at Hansfeld, finding American fuel, we celebrated like winning the lottery. By evening, learning about Stavelot burning, we understood we'd already lost. Americans had so much they could destroy what we'd perished to possess." The 50,000 gallon was less than a single American armored division consumed in 2 days. Less than the Red Ball Express burned in 3 hours. A mere rounding error in Allied daily consumption. Major General J. Lorton Collins later wrote, "Germans' desperate attempts to capture fuel revealed their miscalculation. They assumed we valued fuel as they did, as irreplaceable. They couldn't comprehend we had so much we could burn millions rather than risk tactical disadvantage." Operation Watch on the Rhine faltered through the immutable mathematics of industrial warfare. The offensive consumed approximately 2.8 million gallons, 40% of its overall allocation, the rest sourced from captured supplies. During the same period, Americans consumed 267 million gallons, nearly 100 times more. The Wehrmacht sustained heavy personnel losses, hundreds of tanks, and 1,000 aircraft. But most devastating was the loss of illusions. Every German soldier witnessing American abundance understood Germany wasn't just fighting a conflict, it was participating in its own final act. Joachim Peiper survived, remaining in custody until 1956 for actions during the conflict. On July 14, 1976, he died at his home in France under unresolved circumstances. But in 1967, he told historian Henry Lehman, "Finding that depot was the worst thing. If we'd run out earlier, we might have retreated with dignity. Instead, we discovered Americans had oceans while we had mere drops. We discovered impossibility." The lesson of Peiper's Kampfgruppe extends far beyond World War II. In industrial warfare, logistics always supersedes tactics. Production inevitably overwhelms courage. Abundance ultimately defeats dedication. The German soldier of 1944 was arguably better trained and more experienced, but it made little difference. Americans were backed by an industrial machine that could waste more than Germany could even produce. This truth was encoded in every jerry can at Hansfeld, every gallon consumed by fire at Stavelot, every pipeline laid across France. Conflicts between industrial powers would be decided by factories and refineries, not solely by brilliant generals. Colonel Trevor Dupuy calculated that in December 1944, each American soldier was supported by 67 pounds of supplies daily. Each German received a mere 3 pounds. Americans complained about waste. Germans would have considered American waste as unimaginable abundance. In 1984, 40 years after the pivotal engagement, veterans gathered at L'Église. The museum there still displays Peiper's Tiger tank, positioned exactly where its engines fell silent on December 23, 1944. Former Unteroffizier Karl Wortmann stood beside the tank with former Staff Sergeant Roy Anderson of the 30th Infantry Division. "We always wondered why you stopped," Anderson remarked. "We thought it was tactical." Wortmann laughed bitterly. "We stopped because tanks were empty. You burned millions to keep it from us. How could we possibly fight that?" Anderson was silent for a moment, then replied, "We never knew you were that short. We had so much, we never even thought about it." That poignant exchange captured the essence of December 1944's profound truth. One side measured by the gallon, the other by millions. One fought for each jerry can. The other could afford to ignite oceans. The outcome was, in essence, predetermined. German records provide damning evidence. Army Group B's War Diary, December 1944, December 16th, offensive begins, fuel at 70% of minimum. December 17th, Peiper captures 50,000 gallons. December 18th, multiple depots destroyed, 5+ million gallons lost. December 19th, fuel critical, units immobilized. December 24th, Peiper abandons vehicles, fuel exhaustion. Meanwhile, First Army reports for the same period. December 16th, reserves 3.7 million gallons. December 17th, 2.2 million destroyed. December 18th, 1.8 million received. December 24th, reserves 4.1 million. Americans treated millions with indifference. Germans meticulously conserved individual cans. Beyond mere quantity, American fuel represented a technological superiority. American refineries had perfected catalytic cracking, producing higher octanes more efficiently than German hydrogenation processes. American 100-octane aviation fuel granted Allied aircraft significant performance advantages over German planes running on 87-octane synthetic fuel. Americans had perfected sophisticated additives that Germany simply couldn't replicate: tetraethyl lead, ethylene, and diamine detergents. German engines designed for lower quality fuel often ran poorly on the captured American gasoline, adding yet another layer of difficulty. The profound fuel shortage permeated every aspect of a German soldier's experience. Gefreiter Hans Müller recorded on December 20th that his unit marched 30 kilometers. There was no fuel for trucks. passed abandoned American vehicles with engines running for warmth. They left their engines running. We marched through snow. Medical services were crippled. Ambulances couldn't evacuate the wounded. Field hospitals couldn't power generators. Men perished waiting for transportation that never arrived. Oberarzt Dr. Wilhelm Kirsting testified, "We had excellent surgeons, supplies captured from Americans, but no fuel for ambulances. Men passed away who could have been saved with a 10-kilometer transport." These stark discoveries shattered German propaganda about American weakness. Soldiers had been indoctrinated with narratives of soft and incapable Americans. Then they witnessed Americans casually destroy more resources than Germany could ever hope to possess. Goebbels' diary entry for December 28th reports serious morale problems. Soldiers were writing home about American superiority, actively undermining the official narrative. But these stories spread faster than any censor could hope to control. The myth of German invincibility could not survive contact with the brutal reality of American logistics. The Ardennes failure meant Germany had no strategic options left, only a desperate, prolonged defense. General Jodl testified at Nuremberg, "After the Ardennes, we knew it was lost. We'd played our last card and discovered the enemy held all the aces." Recognizing Germany's profound desperation, the Allies intensified their focus on eliminating fuel production. By February 1945, German fuel production had effectively ceased. The Luftwaffe was permanently grounded. Pilot training was canceled. The Wehrmacht became a static force, slowly and systematically eliminated by mobile Allied armies. Spring 1945 brought surreal scenes across the collapsing Reich. German units surrendered due to immobility, not from a direct tactical defeat. Entire panzer divisions sat helplessly as Allied forces simply drove past them. General Major Fritz Bäumer described, "We had 42 operational tanks, experienced crews, ammunition. We had 300 liters of fuel. Not enough for the next town. We destroyed our tanks and walked into captivity." Meanwhile, the American advance was only constrained by traffic jams caused by the sheer abundance of their vehicles. Patton's Third Army alone boasted 15,000 vehicles. Kampfgruppe Peiper's fuel crisis starkly illustrates how industrial capacity ultimately determined the outcome of World War II. When Peiper stood among those captured jerry cans that December morning, he glimpsed the truth. They fought an enemy whose waste vastly exceeded their own desperate needs. The numbers tell the entire story. German offensive allocation, 5 million gallons. Fuel deliberately destroyed by Americans, 8 million gallons. Daily American consumption, 7.5 million gallons. Peiper's capture at Hansfeld, 50,000 gallons, a mere 0.6% of the daily American supply. The Battle of the Bulge resulted in heavy losses for both sides, but its lasting impact was the undeniable knowledge that permeated German ranks. America possessed an incomprehensible abundance. Peiper's discovery wasn't just about fuel. It was about the fundamental nature of industrial warfare. Victory belonged to whoever could produce the most petroleum, steel, and aluminum. Germany, from the very beginning, never truly stood a chance. The final irony, American forces cataloging abandoned German equipment at La Glaise discovered 39 pristine tanks, abandoned solely for lack of fuel. Major Robert Harrison's salvage report noted, fuel required 8,000 gallons. Classification minimal. Source, local reserve. Time, 4 hours. What was an insurmountable impossibility for the Germans, 8,000 gallons to save their finest tanks, was beneath American notice. A minor request, easily fulfilled from local reserves, surpassed Kampfgruppe Peiper's peak strength. This was Peiper's ultimate discovery at Hansfeld. Not merely that America possessed more fuel, but that American abundance operated on a scale that rendered German scarcity entirely irrelevant. The conflict was decided the moment American industrial capacity fully mobilized. Hansfeld revealed what had been an underlying truth since 1942. Germany was fighting the impossible, meticulously measuring defeat in gallons, while America measured victory in oceans. Today, that Tiger tank sits in La Glace's museum, its fuel gauge forever empty. A silent, powerful monument to the moment when tactical excellence met logistical reality and inevitably lost. Visitors still inquire why such powerful machines were abandoned. The answer remains simple and profound: no fuel. The story of Peiper's Kampfgruppe is a testament to the fact that in the annals of history, sometimes the greatest battles are won not with bullets, but with barrels of oil.